have a lot of people too that have a really big fear of reheated food. I don't know if you see that with
Oh,
any of your kids, but and the parents will say, "This is so frustrating. I'll make this for them and they'll eat it, but they will not do it reheated." And that's
really?
a really big portion of the people I see. And that makes it really hard, especially if you're trying to be economical or if you do find a place where you can go out to eat, but you can't take home leftovers. So a lot of that is stemming from fear of contamination.
Are meal times a serious struggle? Does your child eat a limited number of foods? Does your child eliminate entire food groups? Are you tired of waiting for them to just grow out of it? Welcome to How to Unpicky Your Picky Eater, where you'll learn strategies to help your picky eater expand their palate. With Christine Marati-Yoder, a pediatric feeding specialist, speech pathologist, mom of a child with feeding issues, and author of Mealtime Mindset. Let's get started. Here's Christine.
Today we have Kelly. She is a speech pathologist with over 10 years of experience treating children with all sorts of different feeding aversions, texture aversion, food avoidance, picky eating, ARFID, hesitant eating, and autism-related feeding issues, as well as tube feeding concerns, reflux, and more. She is really well known for her ability to use hypnosis to help overcome these fears. Today, we speak to her and learn more about her hypnosis practice. So, thanks so much for coming on and talking to us about hypnosis and how it relates to feeding.
Sure.
So, how long have you been working with this very specific population? Because feeding is pretty specific as it is. Like most
Yeah.
speech therapists don't have that experience or training, and then to further do that plus the hypnosis. Like, how long have you
Yeah.
been working on that?
Well, so I've been doing feeding for almost 15 years, so a really long time. And when I was at the hospital before private practice, a lot of my kids were older and I didn't know really how to treat them. They had a lot of anxiety and some comorbidities and things like that. So when I went into private practice, I really liked that population. And we did a lot of exposure therapy and talk therapy and things like that. But I was kind of stuck. They were making progress, but it was kind of slow. So there was a person doing hypnosis over in the UK that was really successful, but he didn't really have a feeding background. So I thought, this was maybe like about 4 years ago. What if I got trained in hypnosis, but took my feeding background and I could really make an impact on the lives of these people? So about 4 years ago, I became trained in the hypnosis portion of it. And learned really quickly who it works for and who it doesn't work for. And I really use that as a tool in my toolbox to help the people that it could really benefit. So I've been doing it now for about just over 3 years, the hypnosis part. And I still do traditional feeding therapy as well.
That's
Yeah.
amazing. I love
Yeah.
that. Yeah, so I
Thanks.
love how you took what he had and it really wasn't even he probably wasn't even thinking using it for feeding and you because I've heard of it for quitting smoking.
Hmm.
I feel like that's a
Yeah.
big one that you hear about hypnosis with, but this is
Yeah.
really cool. So you
Yeah.
said you know who it works for and who it doesn't work for. So if someone's listening, how would they know oh, I think that would work for my son or my daughter or oh, that
Mhm.
wouldn't be a good fit. How would they know?
Yeah, so usually it works for people who are a little bit older. So there's not like an age where I say that person has to be this age or I don't do it. But usually like 13, 14 is a good rule of thumb. I have done it on younger kids, but you really have to be able to attend to like something for a good 20 or 25 minutes. And sometimes when kids are a little bit younger, it's hard to really do that. And then the person has to really, really want to change. Like sometimes when our kids are younger, it's really the parents that want them to change, and the kids don't really care yet. But by the time teenagers get into high school, they start having the social impact of eating and feeding, and they start picturing themselves, wow, I'm going to be maybe going to college soon, and I want to be able to be out on my own, or even like I want to be able to go on a date and not only eat like plain pasta. So there's a lot more motivating factors when you get 15 or 16 that like 8 and 9-year-olds just don't have.
Right.
So it works a lot better with older kids or even young adults. I would say about 80% of my hypnosis population are like young adults leaving for college. That's really when everybody is like, wow, I've been dealing with this now for like 17 years. I'm so sick of it and I'm really ready to make that change. And they might have been through feeding therapy 5, 6, 7, 8 times and it just has
Right.
failed. And they're like, wow, I'm really ready to make a big change. And that's usually who it works best for.
Oh, that's amazing. And I know I find that too, the internal motivation is so key. And shifting that mindset from like, yeah, at first it is the parents who really want their kids to eat healthy foods, and the kids don't usually care quite as much about it at the
You're
time.
right. It is.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
then, as they get older, everyone now they're realizing that they have chronic health issues and they're trying to eat
Mhm.
healthy, but they're like, wait, I can't eat healthy because I never overcame my picky eating.
Right, exactly. I feel like when they're really little, we're able to really help them, when they're 2 or 3, because 'cause they're still so moldable. Like as
Yes.
parents, we can really have an influence, but once they get past that age when we're helping kids that are like elementary age, that's just a really hard age. We can make some headway, but it's just a really tricky age. And then sometimes those kids do go through a lot of therapy and they're just in therapy for a long, long time, but it's really hard to make progress until they're kind of at that older age where they find that intrinsic motivation again. And it's
Mhm.
not mom or dad, really pushing them, but it's really them saying, wow, I can't do this sport because I don't have energy, or I can't go to summer camp. And I love summer camp, but I can't go there because I can't eat the food. So usually it's a little bit more into like the high school years that they kind of have that intrinsic motivation again.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's a really good point. And initially, I know it is. It's so true that like they're moldable and then all of a
Yeah,
sudden they hit this like
they're
little
not.
wall and then
I
they're
know.
not. And then I find it's really the parents' mindset that I'm trying to shift is
Yes.
on how to like meet the kids where they're at. And
Yeah.
that we're actually more in that younger, and I feel like you're more in that older
Mhm. Yeah, I
genre.
agree. It's that middle age though that is still tricky, and I
Oh yeah.
sometimes try to tell parents, if they're eating some things, if they maybe have one fruit or one vegetable and they're trying to expand that, sometimes it's not the end of the world. If we can meet their nutritional needs and just kind of get them through this hard phase until they are older and can see things a little bit differently, that's a little bit helpful, more helpful.
Yeah, I know it's a hard time.
It is.
But we try to help the parents like understand, where we can help them and how we can help shift their mindset. Um,
Mhm.
we talk a little bit about doing like affirmations and subliminals,
Yeah,
and that kind of like doesn't remind me of hypnosis,
it
but
definitely
they're
is.
like related
Yeah.
because
A
you're
lot of it
targeting
is
the
just
subconscious.
self-talk. Yeah, it's like
Right.
self-talk, like kind of hyping yourself up for it, all that kind of stuff. That's really all hypnosis is. It's really like a lot of us do it, when you even work out and you're like, wow, I can do this, or I can lift that heavier weight, or I can run just a little bit faster. That's really all it is. It's just taking it to like another level.
Yeah. Oh, that's really cool. Oh, I'm so glad to hear that because I don't know. I was
Yeah.
actually going to say, like, what is like a typical session like?
Yeah. So it's actually really simple. It's not that scary. I know it sometimes is portrayed like in TV and movies as kind of this voodoo weird type magic, but it's really not. Um, it's really, I don't know if you've ever done yoga or anything like that. And at
Yeah.
the end, you go into that deep meditative state. That's kind of what it's like. You kind of are put into that deep meditative state. And when you're in that really kind of deep, almost sleep, but not totally out, is when you're very, very suggestive to a lot of words and phrases that somebody might be saying to you. The key with it is, and why it's so important that you want to change at that time, is the key with it is if you want to make that change, the words that that person is saying will go ahead and make that change in your head. If you don't really want to make that change, nothing somebody is going to say is going to change your mind. That's why when
Right.
you make the example of like smoking cessation or weight loss or something, if you really want to stop smoking, you'll go ahead and that switch will flip and you'll stop smoking if that person is kind of telling you, like leading you down that path. But if you're not ready to stop smoking, no matter what, nothing's going to work for you. And that's the same thing with eating. It's a food phobia that a lot of our older kids are going through, whether it's sensory or they're afraid of contamination or they're afraid of choking or they're afraid that a wetness or a dryness or a crunchiness is going to make them vomit. Anything irrational, we can get rid of that fear, but they have to be willing to let that fear go.
Right. And that was an interesting one that you mentioned, a fear of germs.
Yeah.
I could see that going hand in hand with the feeding because when you go out to eat, there's a lot of people touching food, making it. Like, how do you go out to eat if
That's
you're afraid of
hard.
germs, right? I
Yeah,
didn't even
you don't
think about
see them
that.
washing their hands or you don't see how the food is prepared.
Right.
I have a lot of people too that have a really big fear of reheated food. I don't know if you see that with
Oh,
any of your kids, but and the parents will say, "This is so frustrating. I'll make this for them and they'll eat it, but they will not do it reheated." And that's
really?
a really big portion of the people I see. And that makes it really hard, especially if you're trying to be economical or if you do find a place where you can go out to eat, but you can't take home leftovers. So a lot of that is stemming from fear of contamination. So that's a really big one that people want to get over too. I don't know if maybe you see kids when they're little, they don't have that yet, but it kind of turns
Oh.
into a contamination reheated type thing.
Yeah, because I'd say the oldest kids we normally see are like 13-ish.
Okay. Okay.
So that's where you're, like, just starting to take over. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
We'd
they at
be a
that
good team
point.
to see them
Yeah,
younger and you just send them this way, right?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, because at that point, they haven't even that's, like, not even on their radar. The
Right.
reheated, the germs, they're not, like,
Yeah.
in that mindset yet. That's, like
Yeah.
that could even be, like, making things worse when they get older.
Right.
I could see it now being
Yeah.
harder. It's, like,
Yeah.
hard to
It's super
imagine, like, your picky
interesting.
eater getting worse, but it can
They do though. It
apparently.
kind of manifests itself in something touching something else, which is a little bit stems a lot of our kids kind of with anxiety might have an OCD component or something like that. But foods touching or foods not being stored properly or reheated incorrectly or just kind of festering those germs overnight as it sits and then they can't have it reheated or even reheating it changes the texture. And then our
Right.
kids that had texture issues when they were little, they're now really big when they're like 17. So
Right.
that's another thing too, because sauces change consistency and just everything. If you
Mhm.
picture getting somebody who's 3 to finally do red sauce, cool, they got it, but then it reheats and it gets like coagulated. That's kind of gross.
Right.
So it's hard.
Yeah, that's so true.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. Um, and I was gonna ask, can it be done virtually? Like, can you do this
Yeah.
over the computer?
Yeah, so it works really, really well virtually, believe it or not. So, actually, the person who trained me when I got trained initially, we did everything auditorily because he likes to even take the visual component away. So you have like zero distractions.
Mhm,
Because if you think about it, it's all an auditory thing, anyways.
mhm.
I don't need to touch you. You don't even really need to see me. It's all just listening. So I do have some people who do travel to Florida to see me, and they feel more comfortable in person without the tech piece.
Mhm.
But it's something that can definitely be done over the phone, although I don't do that, or through like a Skype or Zoom, or it can be done in person.
Oh, very cool. That's good because then it
Yeah.
opens people up to,
Yeah.
like, all over or all over the
Yeah.
world really even.
Yeah. Yep. I just saw somebody actually who is stationed over in Kazakhstan.
Wow.
So I can do it from really far away. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what's so amazing about technology. It's like kind of a blessing that you could reach
Yeah.
professionals that you never would have been able to
Mhm.
see normally, right?
Yeah, it's so cool.
That is cool. Um, and then, like, how do you see their mindset change after seeing you? Like, how do they start talking about food differently? Because that's something we always talk about with parents is that we have to change how we talk about food. Like, we wanna change their words from yucky, gross to, I don't like it yet, or I'm
Yeah.
learning about it, just even
Yeah.
changing those simple words. But do you find that they just have that shift automatically
So
after
it's really
listening?
interesting, especially it would be really interesting for you since you see so many kids that are like, ew, and they just kind of push away and they just complete head turn and like, don't want it. And, I don't know, depending on how old your kids are, massive tantrum or just a polite, like, no. And, you can't ever imagine them just eating it. So it's really fascinating. They come to you like that, and you have them choose like 5 or 6 foods that are not preferred foods, obviously. And you do this hypnosis with them, and they just go ahead, stab it with a fork, pick it up, and take a bite, and they just eat it. It's the most amazing thing. And there's like tears. I'm almost crying. Mom's almost always crying. They're like fascinated. And, we do beforehand do a lot of prep with talking about, we're not going to even talk about if we like it or not. We're just going to maybe describe it kind of how you do too. Like
Right.
it's spicy or it's, sweet or salty. Because there still is that disconnect. Maybe they picked pineapple or something. They still might be 17 or 15 and not they're able to get over that fear, and they can put it in their mouth and chew it, but their brain is still like, wow, I've never had this flavor before. So it's still
Right.
new.
Mhm.
So it's not like an automatic like, they're just able to eat it. So that's kind of what you see. And we talk about how it will still have to be worked on, and they'll still have to do it every day, and they'll still have to be open to kind of the work part of it. They just won't be afraid of it. So
Got
we do
it.
talk about
Okay.
that for sure.
Oh, that's really cool. So, yeah, you kind of get them over that initial, like, I
Mhm.
can't even bring it to my face
Right. You don't have to go
piece.
through all the steps of like whether using like a sensory approach with the touch it, lick it, kiss it. You don't have to go through all those steps. Or if it's a behavioral approach and you're using reinforcers, whichever method you're using, those are kind of gone. You don't need to use any of that. They just eat it, which is fine. It's the next step that's the
Mhm.
hard part. You have to continue to give it to yourself over and over again, which is why they have to be motivated because it's still work. So
Okay.
cool. I ate pasta, I ate pineapple, I ate an orange, I ate, broccoli, whatever. But then the next day, it's like I have to do it again because it's still all new to me. So
Got
you
it.
keep having to kind of do it over and over again, which
Got
is the
it.
hard part.
Okay. And then now is it something like where they have to keep seeing you for a while? Because like,
So,
to change
yes.
your mindset, it doesn't like happen usually overnight.
Right. So that yeah, so and that's kind of where the work part comes in. So I always tell parents it's kind of like learning to play an instrument or learning to ride a bike. Cool, you did it, but if you don't do it again for 6 months, it's going to be all new again. So how the person that does it in the UK kind of does like a one-off session, but he's not really a therapist,
Right.
and I'm still a therapist at heart. So what I do is I meet you first, get comfortable. We do an assessment, just like you would imagine it in a traditional feeding evaluation would be. It's a little different because it's more talk therapy than like oral motor exam and things. It's more adult like and more question based, medical based, GI based. And then I see you 4 sessions after that. So we do an assessment. The second one is the hypnosis, and then 3 sessions after that for follow up. And they're usually a week apart. They don't have to be, but they're typically a week apart. And then some parents choose to do like monthly monitoring or like a booster session 2 months after. Or if there's a big life change, I'll see them for follow up. But not everybody does that part.
Okay. All right. That's
Yeah.
pretty good. That's a pretty
Yeah.
fast turnaround though
Pretty
for
quick. Yeah.
mindset.
That's
Yeah.
the point of it is it's like that your whole mindset changes, which is why you don't need all of kind of that's what I was facing a struggle with is it was so slow. All of the exposures and
Right, because
the
I mean,
stuff is so slow.
13-year-olds, I mean, now you've had 13 years of conditioned
Right. Yeah.
negativity towards food. So that's why
You're
we
right.
always say, the sooner you start this, the better, because
Right.
you're just reinforcing more negative feelings about food the longer this
Yes.
goes
You
on.
are totally correct. Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
but that's so cool. That's like
It's
really
super
life
cool.
changing. It's really life
Yeah.
changing.
Yeah, it's really
Yeah.
neat.
Well,
It's
hopefully
amazing.
there's someone that's listening that's like, "Oh my gosh, I have a 20-year-old son who still only eats
Yeah.
3 foods. This would be
Yes, that's
perfect."
like my perfect yeah, and I'm trying to get the word out. I'm trying to, spread the word that there is this help. So I'm trying to reach other people like you and other professionals who see clients like this who maybe have been working on something and they're stuck or they've been in therapy for a long time and this could just be a tool that would help them kind of get over that hurdle.
Right. And now, A lot of our we find a lot of our kids have a lot of oral motor issues that go like they don't have great control of the food. There's a lot of like scattered bolus and stuff.
Yeah,
So, I mean, now, I mean, it might not change when their mindset changes. So even though there's still food probably all over their mouth or whatever, they don't have that fear of, oh, I can't handle this.
exactly.
Right, which is so
Yeah,
cool because I
yep,
think that that's actually my theory is that that's kind of how picky eaters become picky is that
me
they
too.
have these oral motor issues and there's, you know, we always think, oh, like, were they vomiting a lot? Did they choke?
Mhm.
Like, did they have an incident? But sometimes it's not obvious that there was one incident. But my feeling is that there's this moment in their mouth where they just don't feel safe. Maybe,
Mhm.
they didn't chew it as well, or it went to the back a little sooner than they expected. And they were like, oh,
And that's
this food isn't safe
scary.
anymore. And I'm
Yeah.
going to just eliminate it. And then all of a sudden,
It gets
foods
that
drop off.
list
They
gets
just
big, big, big.
Yep,
Yep.
yep, all of a
Mhm.
sudden, they're left with whatever is
Yeah.
safe, and it's
And
the
sometimes they're
easiest to break
young and they
down.
can't verbalize that that's what they're doing.
Right, but even as
Yep.
adults, like, I've had an
Yeah.
adult who had, we do myofunctional therapy too,
Mhm.
and, she did have all these issues, but she couldn't even explain. She's like, "I don't know why, but I'm, like,
Did she
afraid of
just say, like,
salmon."
it just feels like
Yeah,
feels weird or something, like she just
yeah.
couldn't control it well?
Right, but even as an
Wow,
adult, she
that's
couldn't
so cool.
explain why she was, like, afraid of food. She just assumed
Was.
that, like, I don't know, there was something wrong with her, but, there really isn't anything wrong with people. It's
Mm-mm.
just that, like, this is how our brains protect our
Yep,
bodies. It's
you're
like
right.
our brains protect our bodies with fear, and
That's exactly right. Yeah, and the interesting part is, like, your person with the salmon, I'm sure she knew, and it's not that she's not intelligent or anything, she knew it was an
no.
irrational fear. She
Yes.
knew it was silly, for lack of a better word, and that's the perfect kind of candidate for this. It's people that, "My gosh, I know this is so silly," but no matter how much you tell your brain, "This is silly," you won't ever win because your brain's whole goal is to protect you for
Right,
survival. So if it's a survival thing, you'll never win. And it's that fight of willpower and
right.
you just won't win. And so that's why if we can get you into a really relaxed state, that sort of front part of your brain that's
Mhm,
doing that whole like trying to help you like reason and all that stuff goes away. And we can just talk to the subconscious part of your brain and kind of
yeah.
flip that. And then when the front part of your brain and your subconscious brain go to talk again, they'll be in agreement. Cool, salmon's safe. Cool, salmon's safe. And
Right,
you'll be fine.
exactly, yes.
Right. It doesn't mean that she'll like it. She might hate it. I mean, you and I both hate things, right? You're
Yes,
always going to have
everybody.
likes and dislikes.
Mhm,
It just, you won't be afraid of
mhm.
stuff. You'll still be like, no, I really don't like, I don't like condiments. I've never liked them. So you still won't like, it's not going to change what you like and don't like. And that's what I also stress to patients and parents. He's not going to like pickles if he doesn't like pickles. I can't
Right.
make you like something you don't like.
Absolutely. Yes. And that is really important. I'm like, don't get so attached. Like one of the things I talk about when we say making a goal is like, don't get so attached to a very specific food. Like,
Right.
don't say like
Right.
he will eat grandma's meatballs because he
Right.
might hate grandma's
He might
meatballs and he's
hate it. Yes,
allowed to do that.
exactly. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Like
Yep.
I mean, that'd be great. I'm sure grandma would be thrilled if he
Sure.
ate them, but like he might
That's
not like
okay.
them.
Yes, I know.
So
Yeah,
just make
you're
it like
right.
more general, like you'll eat more new foods, you
Yeah,
know?
that's what I do too.
Yeah,
Yeah. Mhm.
exactly.
I agree.
Uh, so thank you so much. Now, how can people find you?
So they can just reach me directly. I have my website is pickyeatersonline.com, or you can email me, Kelly at pickyeatersonline. So that's the easiest way to reach me right now. And all my contact information is on there as well.
Amazing. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm sure
You're
this is super
welcome.
helpful to a lot of people.
Oh, I hope
Um,
so.
yeah, but thanks so much. And
You're welcome.
if anyone's listening that needs Kelly's help, please reach out to her. And we are also here to help. Foodologyfeeding.com for your younger kids. So thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening to How to Unpicky Your Picky Eater. To learn more about achieving your child's feeding goals, check out Christine's website at foodologyfeeding.com. And be sure to tune in next time to How to Unpicky Your Picky Eater.